United States at any moment, and while we're waiting, I'd like to use this time to answer your questions. So please post them in the comments on Facebook or tweet them at me at apiper13 on Twitter. So Vice President Pence has just finished speaking, so President Trump should be out at any moment. The president had been saying all week that over 1 million people wanted to attend. I'm just going to show you the crowd size right now. So it does not appear that they have filled the 19,000 seat arena. I'm looking at a lot of empty bleachers and a lot of empty floor space. This is honestly very good news in terms of social distancing. It's going to make it easier for this maskless crowd to protect itself. But this is not what the president was really looking for. Now again, if you are just tuning in, this is NowThis live fact check of President Trump's rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm NowThis senior politics producer Alan Piper. I am not in Tulsa. I am streaming to you live from my apartment in New York's East Village. Everyone at NowThis is working from home, so we do not have the full benefit of our studio, and I apologize in advance if there are any technical difficulties or if my cats jump in front of the camera again. We are expecting the President of the United States at any moment, but in the meantime, please type your questions in the comments and we will try to answer them. Now, hours ago, news broke that 6 Trump campaign staffers who were setting up for this event tested positive for COVID-19. People have been calling this the first Trump rally since the pandemic hit, but that is not actually true. The day after the CDC announced its first warning about the virus, the president held a rally in Toledo, Ohio. A week after the first case of COVID-19 was identified in the U.S., he held a rally in Wildwood, New Jersey. On January 30th, the same day the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency, he held a rally in Des Moines. On February 10th, he held a rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, and told the crowd that the coronavirus would, quote, miraculously go away in April when, quote, it gets a little bit warmer. On February 28th, he held a rally in Wildwood, New Jersey, and attacked Democrats and the media coverage of the coronavirus, calling it, quote, their new hoax. The very next day was the first known U.S. death from the virus. In January, February, and March, as the disease spread unchecked throughout the United States, and the president urged Americans not to take it seriously, he held a total of 10 rallies. As it turns out, the coronavirus was not a hoax, and it did not go away in April. As of today, it has killed about 120,000 Americans. That's more Americans than were killed on the battlefields of World War I. And the coronavirus is surging in 21 states, including Oklahoma, where the president is holding his rally tonight. Oklahoma saw its biggest ever single-day increase on Thursday. 30,000 new U.S. cases have been diagnosed in the last 24 hours. President Trump claims that we're only reporting more cases because we are doing more tests, but that is not true. It's not just the number of cases that is going up, but the percentage of positive cases, the percentage of cases out of the whole that are positive that are going up. Now, we are expecting the president at any moment. I'm listening to the music that is playing right now. It is part of his rally playlist. He's playing Tom Petty, I Won't Back Down. That is one of the songs that makes a little bit more sense than some of the others. He does have some odd choices on his rally playlist. I would also like to point out on the far lower left side of the screen, you'll see a man in a red, white, and blue cowboy hat. Okay, he's just walked off screen. He has been featured in two videos that we have made with producers Sandy Bacon and Michael Lester. He is a Trump supporter from Minnesota who has traveled with a busload of Trump supporters to attend this rally. I'd like to highlight the fact that amidst this coronavirus pandemic, I hear a lot of people say, well, if people choose to put themselves at risk attending a rally like this, that's their business, let them put themselves at risk. But they're not only putting themselves at risk. This busload of Trump fans that has traveled from Minnesota to this rally in Oklahoma is going to go back to Minnesota, and it's going to stop at gas stations, it's going to make rest stops, it's going to stop for food. And all along the way, the people who attended this rally will be interacting with other people who had no intention of being exposed to the people in this rally. Those supporters will go home to their own community in Minnesota and interact with people there. There are people who have traveled from other parts of the country to get to this rally, which is why it is so striking that the President of the United States has chosen to hold it, even though we are in the midst of the worst public health crisis in a century. Now, the director of Tulsa's public health department implored the president not to hold this rally, and a group of local residents sued to block it on the grounds that it was endangering public health, but the Oklahoma Supreme Court rejected the suit. And even though the president's own CDC is urging Americans not to attend large indoor events, President Trump insisted on holding this rally anyway. He claimed that 19,000 people would be present inside this venue and that some 40,000 or more would be present outside the venue in an overflow facility. The overflow facility has actually been dismantled because so few people showed up. And as you can see, I'll go full screen again for a moment. As you can see, the 19,000 seat venue is not actually full. Now, we are hearing some of the president's unusual music choices for his rally. If you're just tuning in, this is NowThis live fact check of President Trump's rally in Tulsa. I am senior politics producer Alan Piper. We are expecting the President of the United States at any moment, and we're going to use this intervening time to answer your questions. So please type them in the comments on Facebook or tweet them at me at apiper13. Now, as anti-racism protests are taking place in all 50 states, many have seen the choice of Tulsa for the president's rally as at best tone-deaf and at worst sending a dog whistle message to white supremacists who are among his supporters. Tulsa just commemorated the 99th anniversary of one of the worst race-based massacres in U.S. history, where about 300 black Americans were killed. And we're going to post in the comments a video with some more information about it. The Greenwood district in Tulsa was once known as Black Wall Street because it was such a prosperous business community. The success of this black community enraged many white Tulsans, and on May 31st, 1921, a white mob attacked the neighborhood, flew planes over it and bombed it, and burned the community to the ground, destroying more than 1,200 homes and murdering, as I said, about 300 of its residents. Oklahoma is an odd place to hold a rally. It's not a swing state. Tulsa is not a frequent rally spot for President Trump. In fact, he's only ever done one other event in Tulsa that I'm aware of. In January 2016, when he was courting evangelical voters, he did an event at Oral Roberts University. So it is an odd choice now, at this moment of national uproar over systemic racism, that he's chosen the site of a racial massacre just after the anniversary of that massacre to hold a celebration of his candidacy. And what made the racial undertones, or possibly overtones, Even more striking was the initial choice of date for the rally. It was originally going to be last night on Juneteenth, which is sometimes called Black Independence Day, a day that celebrates the end of slavery in the U.S. Facing backlash, President Trump relented and pushed the rally to today, but he then went on to claim credit for making Juneteenth, quote, very famous, falsely telling the Wall Street Journal that, quote, nobody had ever heard of it before. Of course, President Trump frequently assumes that nobody knows things that he doesn't know, such as when he claimed that nobody knew health care could be so complicated. Now, as your fact checker, I would never venture to say what is in the president's heart, but I do know that he has unequivocally engaged in racist business practices. He and his father were sued by the federal government because they refused to rent apartments to people of color. I have personally interviewed a woman who was denied an apartment in a Trump building because of the color of her skin, and she was able to prove it. So as long as we are waiting for the President of the United States, I'm going to share that video with you. Excuse me, this is, as I told you, we are all working from home, so this is slightly low tech.
May Williams. I was denied an apartment in the Trump building based on My name is May Wiggins. I was denied an apartment in the Trump buildings based on the color of my skin.
Before Donald Trump got into the penthouses and the luxury casinos, he and his family were involved in low and moderate income rental housing in Brooklyn, Queens, and other cities.
I applied and was told by the Trump Corporation that there were no vacancies.
What they told May wasn't true, and when she complained to the New York Human Rights Commission, they were able to determine that she'd been lied to.
They sent a Caucasian couple out, and they were told that there was a vacancy.
You can't deny discrimination when the same unit that has been denied to a black person is offered to a white person.
I felt very, very angry. So much so that it still evokes anger and hurt, deep, deep hurt.
Sorry to interrupt that, but the President of the United States has arrived, and we're going to bring you his speech and fact check it in real time.
There ain't no doubt. So we begin, Oklahoma, we begin. Thank you, Oklahoma. And thank you to Vice President Mike Pence. We begin our campaign.
So this isn't actually the beginning of President Trump's campaign. He actually has never stopped campaigning. He has been holding campaign rallies throughout his presidency. This is the 11th rally, I believe, that he has held this year.
Don't go, don't come, don't do anything. Today it was like, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. You are warriors. Thank you. We had some very bad people outside. We had some very bad people outside. They were doing bad things. But I really do. I appreciate it. We have just a tremendous group of people in Oklahoma. And I hear from your two great senators and your governor that we're doing very well in Oklahoma. That's the word. That's the word. I stand before you today to declare the silent majority is stronger than ever before. 5 months from now, we're going to defeat Sleepy Joe Biden.
Now, if Trump supporters are the majority, they are indeed a silent majority. The most comprehensive polls suggest that the majority of speaking Americans disapprove of President Trump, and of course he lost the popular vote by over 3 million ballots.
Of liberty, equality, and justice for all. We are the party of Abraham Lincoln, and we are the party of law and order. Think of what we've done. We will have close to 300 federal judges appointed and approved by the end of my first time. That's an all-time record. That's an all-time record.
I am checking on whether that number of 300 federal judges is accurate. I believe that number is not accurate, but it is in fact true that the president is responsible for appointing an astonishing number of judges, and it is absolutely true that the impact of the Trump presidency will be felt for a generation to come. Over 25% of all federal appeals court judges are Trump appointees. He has been appointing young justices, young judges to lifetime seats, and his appointments have been overwhelmingly conservative, overwhelmingly white, and overwhelmingly male.
We could get a few more, yeah, we could get a few more. We've spent over $2 trillion to completely rebuild the unmatched strength and power of the United States military.
Okay, this claim has been debunked. The president has allocated more funds for the military than had been allocated before, but it is not true to say that he completely rebuilt the military, and it also must be pointed out that he has pulled funds away from the military for certain military projects to reallocate them to the construction of the wall that he still seems largely unable to get built.
Here's my senator, Jim Inhofe. You better vote for him. He's running. He's great. But we'll get to him and James Lankford in a second. Two great senators. You have two great senators. So we passed VA choice. So if you're a veteran For years and years. They've wanted to do it for almost 50 years. We got it done. We get a lot of things done.
This is not true. President Trump has repeatedly taken credit for passing Veterans' Choice. This was done under Barack Obama. Barack Obama signed it into law in 2014.
Get a private doctor. You get fixed up and they pay your bill. We take care of the bill. We take care of the bill. And you get immediate service. It's never happened before. And our approval rating at the VA is now 91%. That's how good it is. Never been anywhere near that number.
I'm going to check on that approval rating number. But again, the Veterans' Choice Act was done under President Obama. President Trump repeatedly takes credit for it, but it was an Obama administration accomplishment.
They were, let's say it could be unions, it could be civil service, right? Let's just say. And so you couldn't get it done. That was another one. For decades and decades, they wanted to get it changed. And I got it done with those people and your congressman who I'm going to introduce. VA accountability, and now somebody treats our veterans badly. And we look at them, and what do we say? We say, you're fired. Get out, right? Get out. They got rid of a lot of bad people that were there for a long time, sort of like me in Washington, draining the swamp. I never knew it was so deep, but it's happening. It's happening. I never knew it was so deep. It's deep and thick and a lot of bad characters. Thank you. We're lowering the price of prescription drugs, making our allies pay their fair share.
All right, so the price of prescription drugs are not, in fact, going down. While there may have been a slowing of the increase of prices, they are not, for most drugs, going down.
We passed the largest tax cuts in the history of our country. The Democrats want to raise your taxes.
The Trump tax cut was not the largest tax cut in history, and it actually raised taxes for many middle-income Americans.
I heard politicians want to lower taxes, not raise them. If you could lower them, you couldn't lose. The Democrats want to substantially raise your taxes. How do you figure that? How do you figure that? And regulation cuts, we passed more regulation cuts than any administration in the history of our country. And with the help of our great energy workers, many of them come from the great state of Oklahoma. Do you ever notice that Biden oftentimes gets the state wrong? He's in Iowa, and he says, it's good to be in Idaho. No, you're in Iowa. He's in New Hampshire, and he says, it's great to be in Ohio. No, you're in New Hampshire. That happens to him all the time. Hasn't happened to me yet. You know, when that happens, there's nothing you can do to make up for it. You might as well just walk off the stage because the speech is a disaster. Yeah. Right? But we just turned the United States into the dominant energy superpower of the world. And because of the Chinese virus, what happened?
It is not a Chinese virus. Viruses do not have nationalities.
Back together, I called Russia. I called Russia. I called Saudi Arabia. And believe it or not, I called Mexico. Mexico was a little bit tough. That's called OPEC Plus. Did you ever hear of OPEC Plus? That's OPEC plus plus. And we got them to do the right thing.
What the president is talking about, so the price of oil was falling, and so he tried to get other countries to produce less oil so that through the laws of supply and demand the price would go up. To do this, he actually agreed to pay Mexico to produce less oil. So it's not actually such a great negotiating victory. They were happy to produce less oil because we paid them to do it. So not only is Mexico not paying to build the wall, Mexico is getting paid for oil that they are not producing.
Petroleum. No president or administration has done more in the first 3.5 years than the Trump administration.
This is not true. Other administrations have done more in their first 3 years than the Trump administration. Many of them have, in fact. But perhaps the best example of one that has was the FDR administration.
You just saw it outside. You saw these thugs that came along. These people call them protesters. Isn't it beautiful? It's so beautiful.
President Trump is calling protesters thugs. I would like to remind people that this country was founded on the idea of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. The president is frequently claiming that Democrats are going to take away the Second Amendment, which no Democrat is trying to do, but he is repeatedly attacking the First Amendment by suggesting that protesters are illegitimate and should not be allowed to protest.
Biggest fire I've ever seen. The whole town is burning. It's like the biggest fire, and he said, "Things are very good here, Anderson." I think it's good. I think it's good. These are wonderful people, Anderson. You ever see that?
It really is startling how quick the president is to condemn anti-racism demonstrators and how hard it was for him to condemn white nationalist demonstrators in Charlottesville, whom he repeatedly suggested included groups of very fine people. He had to hold multiple events to bring himself to say the words that white supremacy was wrong. I would also like to highlight, you may not have heard because I was talking over him, but the president who was just mocking his opponent, Joe Biden, for sometimes messing up statements. The president just mispronounced Minneapolis.
Some little place. We're talking about Seattle. Have you ever been to Seattle? They took over a big chunk, and the governor, who's radical left, all of these places I talk about are Democrat. You know that. Every one of them. Every one of them. And I have an offer out. I said, anytime you want, we'll come in, we'll straighten it out in 1 hour or less. Now, I may be wrong, but it's probably better for us to just watch that disaster. I flew in with some of our great congressmen who we're going to introduce in a second, and I said to him, Congressman, what do you think? I can straighten it out fast. Should we just go in? No, sir. Let it simmer for a little while. Let people see what radical left Democrats will do to our country.
The president seems to be suggesting there are a couple things in that statement that he just made that are alarming. One, he's suggested that protesters should be met with force. We've seen him do this. He had peaceful protesters outside the White House tear-gassed and driven away to make way for a photo op. He's also suggesting that if there was in fact actual violence going on in a democratically controlled city, that he would consider just letting it go and not being involved as a punishment to Democrats.
COVID. They don't talk about when you see 25,000 people walking down Fifth Avenue or walking down a street of a Democrat-run city. You never hear them saying they're not wearing their mask.
Well, we have been covering the anti-racism protests that are taking place in all 50 states, and for the most part, the protesters are wearing masks. Who is not wearing masks are any of the people that I can see in this arena.
What a terrible thing. But you don't hear them talking about COVID. COVID. To be specific, COVID-19. That name gets further and further away from China as opposed to calling it the Chinese virus.
It is not a Chinese virus. It is a virus that is afflicting 188 countries across the world.
And the United States to very heavily infected, but all people from China in late January, which is months earlier than other people would have done it, if they would have done it at all. I saved hundreds of thousands of lives. We don't ever get even a mention.
This statement is not true. The president repeatedly suggests that he saved hundreds of thousands of lives by banning entrance to the U.S. from China. It's not true. He did not ban entrance to the U.S. from China. He claims that he did it early. It's not true either. The president placed some travel restrictions on China at a time when 39 other countries had placed similar or stronger restrictions. He has falsely claimed that he was for it while everyone was against his restrictions, but they were made in accord with advisement from his public health officials. And it was not a complete ban. At least 430,000 people arrived in the U.S. from China since January 1st, including nearly 40,000 in the 2 months after his restrictions went into place. They did not go into place until February. Dr. Jennifer Nuzzo, an epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins, says, quote, "We have not seen any evidence that shows that the travel restrictions stopped or slowed down transmission of the virus that causes COVID-19. What is perhaps most important to note is that even if these restrictions did slow the spread of the virus, the president did not use that time. He did not take advantage of it. He did not declare a state of emergency for about a month and a half later. He did not invoke the Defense Production Act until nearly 2 months later. And analysis of data from multiple institutes has suggested that the president's slow action has cost, at the minimum, tens of thousands of U.S. lives. To date, about 120,000 Americans have died from this disease. The last time he held a rally, he suggested it was no more dangerous than the flu.
When you see a little kid running around, say, "Boy, oh boy, do you have a great immune system." How about a piece of your immune system? They don't even know about this. Let's open the schools, please. Open.
I would like to highlight again that the coronavirus is on the rise in 21 states.
In the fall, we got to get them open. The unhinged left-wing mob is trying to vandalize our history, desecrate our monuments, our beautiful monuments. Tear down our statues and punish, cancel, and persecute anyone who does not conform to their demands for absolute and total control. We're not conforming.
The statues that the president is speaking in defense of are statues of traitors, of U.S. traitors, Confederate fighters who are not American heroes. They took up arms against Americans. They killed Americans in defense of enslaving human beings. President Trump is saying that it would be wrong to take down those statues.
You know, I heard it for the first time 2 weeks ago. I said, well, that one, I mean, they're only kidding. I said, they're not. Minneapolis, you see what's going on? They're not kidding. They got a lot of problems. They'll have a lot of problems. Hey, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and a very tough, you know, I've used the word on occasion, hombre. A very tough hombre is breaking into the window of a...
The president cannot resist labeling bad doers with ethnic language.
911, and they say, I'm sorry, this number is no longer working. By the way, you have...
And Ian McKenna from our newsroom, who is a better Spanish speaker than I am, has pointed out that the president is saying hombre instead of hombre, which means hunger, not man.
In Seattle, you see what's going on there. It's even worse, okay? These people are stone cold crazy.
Governor Jay Inslee of Washington has talked about the protesters in Seattle, saying that the peaceful protests are fundamentally American. I would like to highlight that the vast majority of anti-racism protests that have been taking place across the United States have been peaceful protests, even in the face of documented acts of aggression by police.
People have come up to me and say, how do you take it? I say, do I have a choice? Do I have a choice? We deal with a lot of bad people, but we're winning. And every once in a while, I'll have one of these days where I'm hit left and right, like even this great event. What, if you could have seen outside, or if you could have heard the reports, oh, it's COVID, it's this, it's, by the way, it's a disease, without question, has more names than any disease in history. I can name Kung Flu. I can name 19 different versions of names.
The president has just called this, the coronavirus, Kung Flu. This is a fairly blatantly ethnic smear of this disease, and I would like to highlight that hate crimes against Asian Americans in the U.S. have been on the rise since President Trump began calling the coronavirus the Chinese virus or the Kung Flu.
West Point, we're ready. I said, oh, that's right, I have to make the commencement speech at West Point. You know, they delayed it for 6 weeks because of COVID. So they delayed it, and I went there. 1,106 cadets were graduated, and beautiful.
1,106 cadets at West Point were called back and were forced to quarantine for 2 weeks so that the president could hold this event that the Academy did not want to hold out of safety concerns. West Point is just outside. West Point is in New York. It is in one of the areas that was most heavily afflicted by the coronavirus. No outsider guests were allowed to attend the West Point graduation. The graduates were forced back to New York, a COVID hotspot, to quarantine so that Trump could speak to them. Their families did not get to celebrate in this moment. This was solely done for President Trump.
They make speeches, then I make a speech that lasted a long time. I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, maybe longer. I don't know, but a long time. The sun is pouring down on me, okay? But they said to me before the speech, sir, would you like to salute each cadet, each single cadet, or maybe they'll be in groups of 2. Would you like to salute like this? Yes, like this. Almost 600 times. You know what that is? 600 times! Thank God they were in twos. Because let me tell you, you do that 600 times, you go home and you say, it's like a workout without a weight, right?
I'm double checking. I'm pretty sure that President Obama did that as well, and did not complain about it.
Brand new gorgeous helicopters, the Apaches and the other new ones that we just bought. So they fly over. And the kids throw the hats in the air. It's beautiful, it really is. And it was a beautiful day. And we're all finished. I was on the stage for hours. Hours! Sun, I came home, I had a nice tan. Meaning I had a nice sunburn. No, the sun's going right like that. But I make this speech, right? I salute for probably an hour and a half, maybe more, but around that. Watch, if I'm off by 2 minutes, I'll say, he exaggerated. It was only an hour and 25 minutes. He exaggerated. He lied. He lied. He's a liar. These people are sick to fake news.
And I have confirmed, yes, President Obama did indeed salute each graduate at West Point. And he did not complain about the pain it caused his elbow, unlike President Trump just now.
Essentially, almost 600 times. Now, the general says, sir, are you ready? I said, I'm ready, General. Where are we going now? You have to understand, I left early in the morning to get there. Now it's sort of late in the afternoon. A lot of these fakers were with us. So they know. He said, sir, we can now leave the stage. I said, great, General, let's go. I'll follow you. And he goes like this, right here, sir. I'll walk on.
President Trump still seems to be sore about the fact that he was mocked on Twitter for the fact that he seemed to have trouble going down a ramp.
And the stage was higher than this one. And the ramp was probably 10 yards long. I say, General! Now you got to understand, I have the whole Corps of Cadets looking at me. And I want them to love their president. I did this big thing. I love them. I love them. They're incredible. And they do. I said, General, I've got myself a problem, General. Because I'm wearing leather bottom shoes, which is good if you're walking on flat surfaces. It's not good for ramps. And if I fall down, look at all those press back there. Look at that. And this was a steel ramp. You all saw it, because everybody saw it.
Just to put this into context, 120,000 Americans have died in the past 4 months from the worst public health crisis in a century. About 45 million Americans have lost their jobs. The president seems to be fixated on difficulty he had walking down a ramp a week ago.
Down that ramp without falling on my ass, General. I have no railing. It's true. I didn't really want to grab him. You know why? Because I said that'll be a story too.
For the record, we have put a video of President Trump struggling with this ramp in the comments of this video on Facebook, so you can see for yourself the ordeal that the President of the United States went through.
Skating rink, it's brutal. So I said, General, get ready, because I may grab you so fast. Because I can't fall with the fake news watching. If I fall, I remember when President Ford fell out of the plane, you remember? I remember when another president, nice man, threw up in Japan. And they did slow motion replays. True. Right? It's true. want that, General. Now, he's standing there, big, strong guy, and he's got these shoes, but they're loaded with rubber on the bottom. Because the first thing I did, I looked at his shoes. Then I looked at mine. Very, very slippery. So I end up saying...
Also, the president seems to be saying that the ramp was slippery because it was very wet, because it had been raining. He has also just talked about how sunny it was and how he got so much sun for the hours that he was there.
So what happens is I start the journey inch by inch, right? And I was really bent over, too. I didn't like that, you know. I didn't like this picture. This picture, I'm sure, will be an ad by the fakers. So I was bent over, right?
Well, this image actually has been used in an ad. The Lincoln Project, a group of Republicans who oppose President Trump, have in fact used this image in an ad. They are suggesting that the president is suffering some form of physical or cognitive decline. I am not making such a suggestion. I'm mentioning that they are suggesting that.
Because when I was 10 feet short, I said, General, I'm sorry, I'm not, and I ran down the rest, right? I looked very handsome. That was the only good thing. I wouldn't want to run down the whole thing because the fall there would be definitely bad.
Again, we have a video of this occurring. Just look at it for yourself. It's in the comments, or you can just Google Trump versus ramp.
It ends just before I run. And they said, here was the #1 trending story. I called my wife. I said...
It was not the #1 trending story. This is happening at a time when over 100,000 Americans died from the coronavirus, when there were anti-racism protests in all 50 states. And the president is suggesting now that the most important story facing the nation was his difficulty with a ramp. He has been speaking about it now for several minutes.
To our great First Lady, I said, let me ask you a question. Was it that good, the speech, that I'm trending #1? Because I felt it was really good. No, they don't even mention the speech. They mentioned the fact that you may have Parkinson's disease. It's true. It's true. They say there's something wrong with our president. I'll let you know if there's something wrong, okay? I'll let you know if there's something. I'll tell you what, there's something wrong with Biden, that I can tell you. So then my wife said, well, it wasn't only the ramp. Did you have water? I said, yeah. I was speaking for a long time. I didn't want to drink it, but I wanted to wet my lips a little bit. You know, you're working hard up there with the sun pouring down on you. I love this.
The hot, hot sun pouring down on you. Again, the president is highlighting. He's also been suggesting that it was wet that day, and that's why the ramp was difficult. He's now explaining why he needed to use 2 hands to drink a glass of water.
I said, I just saluted 600 times like this. And this was before I saluted. So what's the problem? She said, well, I know what you did. You had on a very good red tie. That's sort of expensive. It's silk because they look better. They have a better sheen to them. And I don't want to get water on the tie. And I don't want to drink much. So I lifted up the water. I see we have a little glass of water. Where the hell did this water come from? Right? Where did it come from? And I looked down on my tie, because I've done it. I've taken water, and it spills down into your tie. It doesn't look good for a long time. And frankly, the tie is never the same. So I put it up to my lip, and then I say, because I don't want it to, just in case. And they gave me another disease. They gave me another disease.
The President of the United States has been defending his speech at West Point for over 10 minutes now, and he has just demonstrated that he is capable of drinking a glass of water.
Anyway, that's a long story, but here's the story.
I will say, factually, that is correct. This is a long story. The president has been talking about his difficulties with the ramp and the glass of water at West Point for over 12 minutes.
Speech, or he made a great speech. But the kids loved it because they broke their barrier, which wasn't good in terms of COVID. But they broke their barrier and they wanted to shake hands. They wanted to, and I don't want to tell anybody, but there were a couple of kids they put out their hand. I actually shook their hand, okay? I actually shook it. Because they were excited. They were excited. They're with their president. They were excited. The most beautiful young people, men, women, the most beautiful young people you've ever seen.
I would also like to highlight that a coalition of several hundred West Point alumni slammed the president for his politicization of the military and for his decision to conduct this event and put students at risk, seemingly for a photo op.
Fair. It really is. So unfair. They are among the most dishonest people anywhere on earth. They're bad people. Bad people.
The President of the United States is saying that journalists are bad people. I cannot stress enough how outside of the norm that is. Many presidents have had tense relationships with the press. I do not believe that there has been a previous president who has suggested that the press themselves are bad people. We are now getting close. We are over 15 minutes of discussing the coverage of the West Point ceremony.
Those Italians, I love the Italians. They heard they were going to rip down their beautiful Christopher Columbus, and all of a sudden they circled that thing. They didn't do too well in hurting Christopher, did they? Thank you to our Italian population. We're very proud of you, right?
Now, the figure of Christopher Columbus, I appreciate for many Italian Americans is a source of pride, but it is impossible to separate his legacy from the fact that he enslaved, tortured, and raped people.
All Democrat. Everything I tell you is Democrat. And you know, we ought to do something, Mr. Senators. We have two great senators. We ought to come up with legislation that if you burn the American flag, you go to jail for 1 year. 1 year.
President Trump has frequently falsely suggested that Democrats are trying to take away the Second Amendment, but he has just now proposed an idea that would fly in direct opposition to the First Amendment.
In freedom of speech, but that's desecration. That's a terrible thing they do. We used to have things, we don't have them anymore because we want to be so open, so everything, and look what happens. We should have legislation that if somebody wants to burn the American flag and stomp on it, but just burn it, they go to jail for 1 year, okay?
In 1989, the Supreme Court ruled that flag burning was a form of symbolic speech protected under the Constitution.
To an anarchist, these are anarchists, these are not protesters. You listen to the fake news, they say, oh, the protesters were lovely. Could you imagine if people just even slightly to the right tried to take over Seattle?
No one has taken over Seattle. The vast majority of these protests have been peaceful. At least one peaceful protester at this event was arrested today. The Washington Post reports that the Trump campaign directed Tulsa police to remove a woman who was wearing a shirt that said, "I can't breathe." Sheila Buck had a ticket to the rally but was removed for trespassing after sitting on the ground in a barricaded area outside the arena. It is not illegal to wear a shirt with a statement on it.
Biden remains silent in his basement in the face of this brutal assault on our nation and the values of our nation.
This actually is not true. Vice President Biden has been holding multiple events. He, I believe, was meeting with the family of George Floyd while President Trump was taking shelter in his bunker. Biden has been doing many events, but it is true that he does not get the press coverage that the President of the United States gets.
No control. You know, a lot of times I'll make like a speech, and I'll have this beautiful paragraph come out criticizing every little aspect of the speech. Beautiful, brilliant. But Joe didn't. And it'll say, a comment from Joe Biden. But he didn't say it. Professional people, great students in English lit, people that are very smart say it. Joe Biden said, and they'll go into this highly complex paragraph, beautifully worded, and I say, Joe didn't say that. Joe doesn't even understand it.
The president is making baseless claims about his opponent. Joe Biden has been making many speeches in recent days.
401ks, by the way, look at how we're doing in the stock market. Just set another record with NASDAQ. Your 401ks and money itself will be worthless. Your 401ks are doing very well, unless, I don't want to say, if you were stupid, I said, don't sell, don't sell. It went down, but we got it back up. And now NASDAQ, think of it, NASDAQ just set a record, and I think you're going to see a lot of records. And next year, if we don't do anything stupid on November 3rd, you are going to have the greatest economic year we've ever had. That'll be next year.
Well, that is not what most economists think. Economists at Northwestern, Stanford, University of Chicago, and BU predict that the economy will shrink by 11% by the end of this year. President Trump has a history of overpromising on the economy. He ran with the promise that he would have 4% GDP growth or greater every year of his presidency. Prior to this current crisis, it has averaged 2.5%, which is lower than under either Reagan or Clinton.
Never radical left, but he's controlled by the radical left, and now he's really controlled. His campaign staff even donated a lot of money to bail out rioters, looters, and arsonists who ravaged Minneapolis.
Again, the vast majority of protesters around the nation in Minneapolis and elsewhere have been peaceful. It is striking that when white supremacists marched in Charlottesville at the Unite the Right rally in defense of a Confederate monument and were involved in demonstrations that led to a fatal car attack on counter demonstrators, President Trump was quick to defend the protesters, to say that there were very fine people among them, and that most of them were patriots standing up for patriotic ideals. But when anti-racism demonstrators, largely people of color, demonstrate, he is quick to label the entire group as thugs and anarchists.
I know our people. But we will never submit to their threats, and we will never let them destroy our nation. What they did tonight, I saw it on television coming in on Air Force One. One thing about Air Force One, we got plenty of televisions. We have televisions in closets. You open up the closet, got a television. We got a lot of televisions. It's a great plane, great everything. By the way, we ordered new ones. No president wanted to do it. They thought it was luxury. I said, wait a minute. Air Force One is 31 years old. People don't realize that. So I said, they gave me a chart very early in my administration, like, how about the first week? Sir, would you sign for this plane? Now, it's actually 2 planes. Would you sign for this plane? Air Force One. I said, how old is the original or the one we have now? Sir, it's 31, 32 years. And I'd see people coming in from foreign lands that can't compete with us. Rich countries, but they can't compete with you. And they have a brand new, beautiful 747-800, 747. And I said, wait a minute. That country has new, and we have a 31-year, so somebody had to do it. So the deal was made, and it was made for a lot of money. I think it was $5.7 or $5.6 billion. Now, in all fairness, it's 2 planes, and there's a lot of stuff in those planes. I won't talk to you about it. So I told Boeing, the head of Boeing, they said, sir, please, would like to get started on the planes. I said, I do too, but I'm not paying $5.6 billion. And I'm not paying $4.6 billion. I said, it has to have a 3 on the front of it. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of money too, but it is a rather complex situation. They said, no way, no way. This was before Boeing had problems, by the way. But Boeing's coming back. They're coming back. The greatest company in the world, and it had some big problems. It had a couple of problems that didn't work out. That was terrible. But the greatest, I think before that, it was the greatest company in the world. It made up 1/4 of a point of our GDP. Think how big that is, one company. It was an unbelievable machine. And then they made a plane, and they did some foolish things, and a terrible thing happened, and all of a sudden, they've gone through hell. But you know what? They're coming back. We're ready to help them if they need it, but they're coming back, and they're coming back strong. But this was the Boeing before that, and they were riding high, and like I was before this thing came in. But we're still riding high because you know what? On November 3rd, we're going to win. We're going to win. So they came in and they said, no, we want, 5.6 billion, whatever it was. If I'm a little bit off, they'll go crazy, you know. Whatever. But it was a lot. 5.6 billion. Nope, got to have a 3. Got to have a 3. Call me up. Nope, cancel the contract. I said, cancel the contract. I want to cancel. I said, General, can you cancel the contract? He said, yes, sir. I'm very proud of it. Oh, good. Cancel it. Okay, sir. By the way, to cancel it, do you have to pay anything? Yes, sir. We have a cancellation fee, sir. How much is it, General? $250 million, sir. I said, what? Sir, we made a good deal. $250 million to cancel. You mean if we don't buy the plane, we have to hand them $250 million? That's not good, right? Look at these two guys. They're looking. By the way, that's like a good story compared to some I could tell you, like with aircraft carriers. So they said $250 million, or, I always say this, or around that number, because I'm off by a little bit. They say, oh, he exaggerates. I look at numbers all day long. That's what I look at for years now, for my whole life when you think of it. $250 million cancellation fee, sir. He was very proud of himself. What a great deal. I say, General, don't cancel. Don't cancel. Just tell him I don't want the planes. Don't put anything in writing. Don't put it in writing, General. Why, sir? Because I don't want to pay $250. True. Do you hear that, Jim? Jim Inhofe, he's great. You hear that, Jim? You know that story. He does a great job. So here's what happened, the bottom line. Boeing says, no way, no way, no way. The next week they say, no way we're doing it. The next week they said, how about $5 billion? I said, no way, no way. The next week they said, 4.8. I said, nope, it's got to have a 3 on the front of it. Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Don't you understand?
So the president is telling a very long and somewhat rambling story, claiming that he got negotiated the price down for a new Air Force One from Boeing, claiming that it was initially going to be over $5 billion and that he got it down to around $3 billion. The truth is the reverse. The Washington Post investigated this story. $3.2 billion was the initial estimate. The final order that was agreed to actually was $5.3 billion. This back and forth negotiating that the president did not lower the cost and possibly actually increased the cost by around $2 billion.
Talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. When I get foreign nations to pay us billions and billions of dollars, nobody wants to talk about that. When I take soldiers out of countries because they're not treating us properly, Germany is an example. I mean, I have a German heritage, like some of you. I said, let's get it down from 50,000 to 25,000 because they're delinquent. For many years, they're delinquent. They haven't been paying what they're supposed to be paying. They're paying 1% instead of 2%, and 2% is a very low number. And they say, yes, we think by 2030, maybe 2032, we could get current. I said, no, Angela. Angela, please. Don't say that, Angela.
So the president has repeatedly seemed to be confused about the way NATO works and about the way U.S. power works. NATO is not an organization. He's repeatedly falsely claimed that other nations are delinquent with dues. That's not actually how it works, and it is actually to the U.S. advantage to have U.S. troops stationed around the world in friendly places.
So we're negotiating, let's see. But in the meantime, we're reducing our troops. Remember this. Remember this. We're supposed to protect Germany from Russia. But Germany is paying Russia billions of dollars for energy coming from a pipeline, brand new pipeline. So they pay the country we're supposed to protect them from. They pay billions of dollars to that country. We're supposed to protect them. Excuse me, how does that work? How does that work? And the great thing is with Jim Inhofe and with James Langford likewise, when they just said they love you, James. When they hear it, they get it. A lot of people don't get it. They get it. We cannot continue to be ripped off. We're ripped off by so many countries, and we're stopping it. And that means that a lot of people don't want me here. They don't want me here. There are a lot of people that don't want me here. You know, they don't sell a lot of bombs when we're not dropping bombs on people. You know that, right? It's called the military-industrial complex. When rioting and looting broke out in our nation's capital, I very quickly deployed the National Guard. I said, get them in. After watching for an evening or two, we stopped the violence and restored peace and order.
What actually happened is that the President of the United States ordered tear gas and rubber bullets fired at peaceful protesters. This act has been condemned by other world leaders. It has been condemned by former military leaders such as Colin Powell and James Mattis. And the protests, again, have been overwhelmingly peaceful.
Mayor Bowser, they were heading over to the Jefferson Memorial recently. And they wanted to do damage to our great, beautiful Jefferson Memorial. Not going to happen. Don't worry about it.
There is no evidence to substantiate this story.
The choice in 220 is very simple. Do you want to bow before the left-wing mob? Or do you want to stand up tall and proud as Americans? and explain this to the NFL. I like the NFL. I like Roger Goodell, but I didn't like what he said a week ago. I said, where did that come from in the middle of the summer? Nobody's even asking. We will never kneel to our national anthem or our great American flag. We will stand proud and we will stand tall.
So the president is creating an interesting problem here. He is saying that protests that protests where destruction is done to property are illegitimate, but he's also saying that simply kneeling is an unacceptable form of protest. He has not made clear what forms of protest are actually available. As we've highlighted, even wearing a T-shirt was seen as an unacceptable form of protest. What are the legitimate expressions of the First Amendment in President Trump's worldview? For the alt-right, it's very clear that marching with torches and chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and other racist slogans is acceptable, is potentially the work of very fine people. But kneeling during the national anthem, respectfully kneeling, is off limits.
Very few people. And they want to abolish ICE. Our great people from ICE who send the roughest, toughest, meanest people that you've ever seen or ever heard. Generally speaking, when they have lots of tattoos on their face, they're not looking to do you much help. ICE, they're rough guys, they're rough. They're great Americans, they're rough. But they're walking, they call them a pack. They're walking to a pack of tough MS-13 gang members. And you know, we shouldn't say this, it's not nice. They want us to negotiate. They start swinging, and the others start swinging. Everybody's swinging. At the end, they carry them back, and they throw them into the paddy wagon, right? They're great. And these people want to get rid of ICE. They get rid of murderers. They get rid of rapists. They get rid of the worst scum on earth.
Well, actually, there does not appear to be any prioritization of deportation of criminals under President Trump's use of ICE. And I would like to highlight, President Trump has frequently suggested that immigrants, both undocumented immigrants and those who are here through fully documented means, are adding to criminality. The conservative Cato Institute has found that immigrants, both documented and undocumented, are considerably less likely to commit crime than native-born citizens of the U.S.
MS-13 gang members. In Joe Biden's America, rioters, looters, and criminal aliens have more rights than law-abiding citizens, and that's true.
I just want to highlight that the President of the United States has just said that people who desecrate a flag should be locked, which is legal. Whether you agree with it or not, it is legal, should be locked up for over a year. He's suggested that peaceful protesters, he's demonstrated that he wants peaceful protesters tear-gassed, and he's saying that law-abiding citizens are going to be having their rights taken away under his opponent's administration.
Much, much worse if we don't keep them out. We have to do this. We have to go to the polls on November 3rd, and the rest, you know what to do. You know what to do. Got to keep the White House. Joe Biden's record can be summed up as 4 decades of betrayal, calamity, and failure. He never did anything. He was a senator. He was a vice president. He was, before that, something. Guy, you know what's great? President Trump was tough on this, or he was tough. They complained. Never did anything about it. He's been there for 43 years or 47 years. He never did anything about it. Biden supported every globalist attack. on the American worker. Let's make every country in the world rich but ourselves, including NAFTA, the disaster of NAFTA. He wanted to go, and TPP would have ruined our automobile industry. Korea, I renegotiated the deal. I took a horrible deal. That was a Hillary Clinton special. That was a Hillary Clinton special. She said, we have to make this deal with South Korea.
All right, so we're going to talk about this trade deal for a moment, but I just want to highlight, since the president was talking about ICE, I want to highlight that as of June 1st, more than 1,400 immigration detainees in the U.S. had tested positive for the coronavirus. ICE carried out 232 deportation flights to Latin America and Caribbean countries between February 3rd and April 24th, despite outbreaks of COVID-19 at detention centers and government travel restrictions. Human Rights Watch has said that the U.S. government should impose a moratorium on deportations during the COVID-19 pandemic to avoid contributing to the global spread of the virus. We'd like to highlight the U.S. has more cases than anyone else. We don't need to worry at this point about other people from other countries bringing it here. We need to not send it to other countries from here.
Early and decisive action to ban travel from China and protect Americans from the virus. And as I said, Joe Biden opposed my decision and called it hysteria.
He actually did not. The president is rewriting the timeline of his response, and Ian, when you have a chance, if you can put the video with the correct timeline in the comments, that may be useful to viewers. President Trump has repeatedly falsely claimed that an early action that was opposed by others to totally ban travel from China saved American lives. I mentioned this earlier this evening, that 39 other countries had travel restrictions on China at that time or earlier and had more serious restrictions. Joe Biden did not say that he opposed the travel restrictions. Joe Biden was sounding alarms about the coronavirus in January while the President of the United States was saying that it was no more dangerous than the flu. Some 40,000 people entered the country from China after these travel restrictions took effect, and there is no evidence that the restrictions ultimately saved any American lives.
You down. That's been his history. At my direction early this year, the heroes of the U.S. military took out the world's top terrorist, the savage killer and leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi, and the #1 terrorist anywhere in the world, Qasem Soleimani. We took him out. Joe Biden opposed killing Soleimani. He was vehemently, we killed this #1 terrorist. He didn't like it. You know why he didn't like it? Because he thought it would be good politically. That didn't work out too well. Just as he opposed the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. He opposed it. You know that. Biden is always on the wrong side of history, as said by people that are with him and worked with him. He never made a correct foreign policy decision. Biden is a puppet for China. Son walked out with $1.5 billion. I think it's a little bit. Allowing them to rip off America for many years. Now they're paying us billions and billions of dollars. We give a lot of it to our farmers. We have plenty left over. China's not exactly happy with me.
The president routinely falsely claims that China is paying billions in tariffs. That is not how tariffs work. Tariffs on Chinese goods are not paid by China. This is basic economics 101. It is U.S. importers. Tariffs on Chinese goods are essentially a tax on Americans, and it is estimated that the average American family has spent about $1,000 more as a result of these tariffs that the president has placed on Chinese goods.
These people, I mean, some of the people are waiting for 5 days, especially in this location, right? You take your time, darling. Take your time. Thank you very much. Take your time. Doctor, thank you, doctor.
It appears that someone is being removed for medical reasons from this arena, I would again like to highlight that no one in this arena is wearing a mask in the midst of the worst public health crisis in a century.
It's incredible. He never did anything against China, Joe Biden. And that's why they desperately want him to win. They want him to win so badly. Iran wants him to win so badly. Let me tell you, I'm going to make a very fast deal, the best deal you've ever seen. I've already made one with China, but I can make even more. They want me to lose because they will own the United States if I lose.
The subject of China may be a sore point for President Trump today. He lost his bid to block John Bolton's tell-all book from coming out, and one of the bombshell accusations is that Donald Trump begged China's president to help in re-electing him, and that Trump made concessions to China, such as supporting their detainment of Uyghur Muslims in exchange for election help. This is suggested by the upcoming tell-all book of John Bolton's.
You'll own America. You're going to own it. They'll say you own it. So I don't mind. I told them, we can wait. But when I win, you're going to pay a much higher price than if you made a deal. Now, it's true. True. Told them that. I told them that. And look what happened to Biden in Ukraine, where his son's paid $83,000 a month and he was jobless. Give me a break. $83,000 a month, more than anybody.
President Trump repeatedly suggests that Hunter Biden has benefited from some form of nepotism. I would like to highlight that President Trump's son-in-law, with no background in crisis management or foreign policy or diplomacy, has been placed in charge of large aspects of the U.S. response to the coronavirus pandemic and to negotiating peace in the Middle East. President Trump's daughter, with no public policy experience, is a senior White House advisor. The false statements are coming so quickly that we can't get on them all. He repeated his false claim that the Obama-Biden administration gave $150 billion in cash to Iran as part of the Iran deal. That is not true. It is simply false. It is something that the president likes to falsely claim. It was not part of the Iran deal. The vast majority of public policy experts believe that the Iran deal was working, that it was in fact preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, and that since President Trump has pulled out of the deal, Iran is now closer to developing a nuclear weapon. President Trump has also just now, while I've been talking, repeated myths about Democrats pushing for, quote, late-term abortions. The president has essentially been slandering Democrats, accusing them of supporting medical procedures that do not exist, such as euthanizing healthy, already born babies.
Supreme Court justices who will utterly obliterate your Constitution, and you now see how important the Supreme Court is. Think if we didn't have two justices that I think have been very, very, very good. But think how important it is. Think how important it is. And we still, I guess it's, I don't know if it's an equal court. It's almost like we're a minority court, right? It's almost like we're a minority court. The recent Supreme Court cases prove that if Joe Biden is elected, he will stack the court with extremists and the forgotten men and women. Together with everyone else, we'll lose everything. The forgotten men and women. I campaigned on the forgotten. These are great people. These are substantial people. These are the elite. By the way, you're the elite. They're not the elite. You're the elite. They said, somebody 2 days ago said, sir, the elite are really working hard on trying to destroy you. I said, yeah. Why do you call them the elite? I said, why? Well, they're not elite. I look better than them. Much more handsome. got better hair than they do. I got nicer properties. I got nicer houses. I got nicer apartments. I got nicer everything. I ran for politics once, just once in my life, and I became president of the United States. Once. Just once. And hopefully, if you get out and vote, we'll do it one more time. We won't even toy with them about 3 or 4 more times. We won't.
It is disturbing. The President of the United States does frequently joke about the possibility of serving more than 2 terms.
But I'll be soon announcing a new list of exceptional candidates for the United States Supreme Court, and I'll choose only from that list 100%, probably 25 incredible people, any one of which could be a great justice, any one of which. And I did it last time, and people loved when I did it. And I'll only pick from that list. Biden can't release his list because the names would be too extreme, too radical. They wouldn't be acceptable, but they will be very radical people. People don't understand, but we actually won on DACA yesterday. We actually won because they basically said, you won, but you have to come back and redo it.
The president did not win on DACA, so President Trump is trying to President Trump was seeking to deport roughly 700,000 Dreamers. These are essentially, I'm going to say Americans. They are children. They are young adults who came to the U.S. as children, were brought here, and have been part of the fabric of America and are American in every way except for a slip of paper confirming their citizenship. Barack Obama signed an order allowing for a deferment of potential deportation for them, and President Trump sought to repeal that order. The Supreme Court found that he did not have grounds to repeal that order. That was not a victory for President Trump. He, in fact, described it as a shotgun blow to the face at the time.
To be in charge of his environmental policy and his energy, you can forget petroleum. How does Oklahoma feel about being petroleum-free? Not good, right? Our country will have no energy. Our country will have nothing. Oklahoma, Texas, North Dakota, and many others will all be out of business. I don't think that's going to work out too well, but she's actually in charge of environmental policy, and you know what that means. She doesn't even want wind. She doesn't want those bird-killing machines that go round and round. You want to see a lot of birds that are dead? Go under a windmill sometime. She wants us to go back to the Stone Ages because she's got no sense, no credentials.
So President Trump is doing a lot of fear-mongering about what he anticipates the energy policy of Joe Biden would be. He's said that Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would be in charge of it. That is not known. She is among his energy advisors, but there is no evidence that she would be in charge of it. There is no evidence that she would seek, that whoever would be in charge of it would seek to bring America back to the Stone Age. There is a little bit of truth to the idea that wind turbines kill some birds, but but President Trump exaggerates the threat of that. What threat he seeks to downplay is that experts believe that if the climate crisis is not averted, we will face mass disruptions to life itself, but also to the economy. So the idea of a choice between taking care of the environment and taking care of the economy is a false choice. Also, the Audubon Society says that wind turbines kill fewer birds in the U.S. than cats, buildings, or cars. So that puts it into perspective.
For socialism. When Biden first ran for president over 33 years ago, remember I used to call him 1% Joe. He never got more than 1%. Until Obama took him off the trash heap. But he blatantly copied the speech of a British politician, even ripping off the man's personal biography and family history and claiming it was his own. He forgot to say he was born in America.
It is interesting that President Trump would choose to attack Joe Biden by accusing him of plagiarism when President Trump's wife delivered almost word for word Michelle Obama's speech at the Republican National Convention.
Just tens of millions of people like yourselves, decent, hard-working Americans who he's never met, and he frankly probably doesn't want to meet. America should not take lectures on racial justice from Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. A man who praised and partnered with segregationists, shipped millions of black American jobs overseas, and everyone else's jobs too, by the way. If I didn't come along, we're building auto plants, we're building everything. And there's never been a comeback like we're making right now. Never been.
I do want to point out that U.S. manufacturing actually was in decline before the coronavirus hit.
Open borders, trapped young children in failing government schools, built cages. Those cages were built by Obama and Biden.
President Trump is falsely accusing the Obama-Biden administration of his own child separation policy. During the Obama-Biden administration, there was a crisis of a large number of unaccompanied minors arriving at the U.S. These were children arriving without a parent. And the administration's response was imperfect in dealing with that, but it must be noted that these were children arriving without parents. President Trump likes to conflate that with his own policy of parents arriving with their children, having their children taken from them, with no system in place to reunite the children with the parents.
They should not get rewarded with an election victory on November 3rd. That shouldn't happen. It'll destroy this country. Our country will be destroyed. We've all worked too hard. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Some do, actually, but in a very sinister way. Virtually every policy that has hurt black Americans for half a century, Joe Biden has supported or enacted.
This is not a true statement, and this is an odd statement for a president who has been endorsed by the official newspaper of the Klan, who has been endorsed by David Duke, who has called white supremacists very fine people. It is strange for him to be making this particular argument against his opponent.
Working, wonderful friends, senators, they do a great job. Senator Jim Inhofe and James Lankford, please stand up. Two very respected, I will tell you, two very respected people in Washington. They're respected by everybody. They do some job, and I'd have you come.
I want to highlight that this week, Senator James Lankford blocked Senate consideration of the Equality Act, which would ban discrimination against LGBTQ Americans.
Have any competition? Is somebody actually running against? There's no competition that he's got. I know he's got James's support. He's got my support. I give him 100% endorsement. Jim Inhofe. I give it to James, too, but he's not running this time. Thank you. Jim, great job. Thank you very much. What a great senator he is. Also here is a man who's respected by so many. He's a little bit right of the people we've been talking about tonight. Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas.
Senator Tom Cotton, who called for the military to be deployed against peaceful protesters in the U.S.
They like you people. Thank you, Tom. Great job you're doing. We're glad to be joined as well by a man that I've gotten to know. He's done an incredible job with COVID and with everything else he touches. Governor Kevin Stitt. Thank you both.
Well, the president is praising Oklahoma's governor for his handling of the coronavirus crisis. Oklahoma is one of 21 states where coronavirus cases are on the rise.
Frank Lucas, Tom Cole, he's been here for a little while. He's done an incredible job. Mark Wayne Mullen, you don't want to fight with him. I want to put him and Jim Jordan in a match together. Kevin Hearn, great job today, Kevin. The great Jim Jordan. Elise Stefanak.
Now, Jim Jordan is taking a lot of heat for allegedly helping cover up a sex abuse scandal at Ohio State University.
These are warriors, folks. These are great warriors. During the fake impeachment trial, I'll tell you what, there was nobody that could have done the job they've done.
It was not a fake impeachment trial. The President of the United States was, in fact, impeached. And the central argument around his impeachment involved the accusation that he had used nearly $400 million in U.S. taxpayer-funded military aid to attempt to extort a personal political favor from the president of Ukraine, and then abused his power to obstruct justice, obstruct Congress, and cover this all up. Now, one more voice has joined the chorus of confirming these accusations, and that is John Bolton, whose book reportedly corroborates that he was in the room when President Trump attempted to pressure the president of Ukraine to dig up dirt on his political rivals. Unfortunately, John Bolton refused to testify before Congress at a time when it would have been helpful to the administration of justice to do so, seemingly to avoid giving away spoilers from his upcoming book.
He's ever had. We have the best employment numbers.
President Trump is falsely claiming that prior to the current economic crisis was the best economy in the history of the country. This is not true. The final 3 years of the Obama administration saw the creation of more jobs than were created in the first 3 years of the Trump administration. President Trump had promised a 4% GDP growth. It averaged 2.5%, which is lower than under Reagan or Clinton, while the stock market has hit some record highs during his presidency. It grew at a faster rate under Obama and Clinton, and the national debt has grown about 50% under Trump, and that is not factoring in the $2 trillion relief package. Now, the president has been boasting about the low unemployment rate of black Americans. The fact of the matter is that President Obama presided over the largest ever drop in black unemployment, and while black unemployment did reach a record low under Trump, it was still roughly double to that of white Americans. Black median income fell by $2,000 under Trump. And in the most recent numbers, black unemployment climbed to the highest rate in more than a decade in May as the coronavirus pandemic continued to weigh on the U.S. economy and show a disproportionate impact on black Americans.
We're going to be way up. We're not going to be where we were, but in many ways, other than all of the horrible, horrible death that was so needlessly caused by a virus that should have been stopped where it originated, which was China.
The president seems to be, again, trying to cast the blame on China, but multiple analyses have suggested that tens of thousands of American lives, at a minimum, could have been saved if he had taken action sooner.
And you're not going to want to lose all of that wealth that you've accumulated, whether it's real estate wealth or any wealth you can think, because it'll all come tumbling down if these people are put in charge, and if they double and triple and quadruple your taxes, it'll be a whole different ballgame. So
no one is talking about doubling, tripling, or quadrupling middle income taxes. President Trump did give a massive tax cut to corporations and some of the wealthiest Americans, but many middle-income Americans saw their taxes go up as a result of Trump's tax law.
Happening. If you see it happening on November 3rd, you don't have the guts to vote against Trump. Even you don't have the guts to vote against Trump. Say, wait a minute, darling, my 401k is higher than it was the last time. I don't think I want to take a chance. You're not going to want to do that. The stock market has been the best. Think of this. Go back 1 week and go back 50 days. In that 50-day period, it's the strongest 50 days in the history of the stock market. Think of it.
So President Trump seems to confuse the health of the economy with the health of the stock market. I'd like to invite you to reflect on how much stock you personally own. The health of the stock market is very important to many of the wealthiest Americans, but a large number of Americans have no stock holdings at all. Now, I would like to highlight that while the stock market has hit record highs before some of the recent drops, it did grow at a faster rate under Obama and Clinton. But a more meaningful economic metric for most Americans is that real wages, when adjusted for inflation, have been on the decline under the Trump years.
And they're vicious, but they don't know why. I'm telling you, they don't know why. What's wrong with having the strongest military brand new in the world all built? What's wrong with having these great economic numbers? What's wrong with having to close it down? We saved millions of lives. You know, a lot of people say we should have gone herd. Let's go herd. Ask him, how are they doing in Brazil? He's a great friend of mine. Not good. You heard
President Trump is now again trying to compare his response to the coronavirus to what would have happened if he had done nothing. And while it is unequivocally true that things would have been worse if he had done nothing, multiple analyses have suggested that that many tens of thousands of American lives, potentially 90% of the lives that have been lost, could have been saved if the president had taken action earlier. To date, around 120,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. That is more Americans than were killed on the battlefields of World War I.
Also, friend of theirs, Senator Tim Scott, South Carolina, to create opportunity zones, which are doing incredibly. And since then, countless jobs and $100 billion of new investment, not government investment, have poured into 9,000 of our most distressed neighborhoods anywhere in the country. 9,000. Never happened before.
Now, many critics of the opportunity zones that President Trump has talked about say that it is actually just a giveaway to real estate developers, to people like the Donald Trumps and Jared Kushners of the world, and that they have disproportionately benefited from it.
On the African American Civil Rights Network. So many of my friends have been asking me to do that. So many of my friends, including these great politicians. So we're going to do that. It'll be done very quickly. We will forever remember and honor the courageous people who helped build this state and this country. Democrats are stoking division in order to distract from their decades of failure on schools, jobs, housing, justice, and crime. In major city public schools run by Democrats, over 2/3 of students are falling behind in reading and math, and I think the numbers are worse than that. But Democrats would rather deny these children the future they deserve than allow them to attend the charter, public, private, religious, or independent schools of their choice. Pro-choice. Pro-choice.
President Trump has just declared that he is pro-choice. I don't think he means that the way most people tend to use that phrase.
To certain unions that have a lot of power over the Democrats, even though they know it's wrong. Republicans believe access to education is a civil right. It's a civil right. 20 of the most dangerous cities in America are controlled by Democrats. Think of that. 20 of 20. And so is nearly every major city with a child poverty rate that's over 30%. They're controlled by Democrats. We can name every one of them. The murder rate in Baltimore and Detroit is higher than El Salvador, Guatemala, or even Afghanistan. How are they doing, the Democrats running those cities? Your whole country will be like that. In 2018 alone, our police arrested nearly 12,000 people for murder and manslaughter, 25,000 people for rape, and nearly 1.5 million for assault, violent assault. The Democrats' push against our police will drive up crime and drive up costs at levels you'd never believe. Thousands of innocent lives will be lost. As president, I will always support the incredible men and women of law enforcement. A vote for Republicans is a vote for better schools, better jobs, safer families, and stronger communities for all Americans. There's a limit to what we can together achieve with 4 more years. With your help, we will lift millions of our citizens from welfare to work, dependence to independence, and poverty to prosperity. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And that was happening at a level that nobody ever thought they'd see. It was happening before this COVID came in. It was happening at a level that nobody believed.
So the president has been making a number of false and misleading statements, and I've been trying to rapidly gather facts, but it's been moving very quickly. The president has suggested that Democratic mismanagement has led to economic disaster in democratically controlled areas. I want to highlight the fact, and he also said that that under Democrats there is a greater need for welfare. I would like to highlight that several of the biggest recipients of welfare, the states that where the highest percentage of people depend on government funding, are Kentucky, Mississippi, West Virginia, Montana, and Alaska.
Fight against building the wall. You know, in the end, they gave up. You know what happened? They realized it was a bad issue for them because these open borders, I love when they fight for open borders because anybody...
No one is fighting for open borders. People are fighting for a common sense immigration reform where there is a path to citizenship for people who are already part of the American fabric, and they are fighting to not rip children away from parents at their border, and to not turn away lawful asylum seekers, and not to build a wall.
System of immigration that puts American workers first. We will revitalize our cities and we will build gleaming new roads, bridges, tunnels, and airports all across our land. We will enact new trade deals that result in more products proudly stamped with that beautiful phrase, made in the USA. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. Made in the USA. That's happening too. We have so many plants coming into Michigan and so many other states. We have car plants coming in. Would have never come if I wasn't president.
Now, President Trump talks about that "Made in the USA" label. That is not something something that he has valued in his own industry or even in his own campaign merchandise to a large extent. In 2018, there were 268 items for sale on the Trump Organization's online store. Of those, 41 were made in the USA and listed in a separate section highlighting U.S. goods. That means that American products made up only 15% of the Trump store's available merchandise.
To do, and we have now obliterated, we have now captured 100% of the ISIS caliphate.
And the president is falsely suggesting that ISIS is obliterated. ISIS continues to be a threat.
Depleted military when I took over, like our empty shelves medically when I took over, like all of the things that when I took over it was a mess. We have done a job. You had to see what ISIS was doing. They were getting bigger, 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 bigger. I came in smaller, smaller, smaller. Sir, we've just taken 100%. We will launch a new age of American ambition in space, and the United States will be the first nation to land on Mars. Good program.
So the president has falsely claimed that the military and the medical supplies were depleted when he got here. President Obama's former national security advisor, Susan Rice, has disputed this empty cupboard theory that President Trump puts forward. President Trump has blamed the lack of personal protective equipment and ventilators that were needed as the coronavirus began to sweep the nation as a problem of the Obama administration's. Susan Rice says that it is not true that the administration was left with insufficient goods. It merely failed to restock them over the course of the past 3 years after it used some of these goods in confronting national disasters. But even if it were true, it is worth noting that the president has had 3.5 years to rebuild those stockpiles.
Of equal justice under the law, we believe in the dignity of work and the sanctity of life. We believe that faith and family, not government and bureaucracy, are the true American way.
The president says that faith is part of the true American way. It is important to note that he campaigned on the premise of barring an entire religion of people from entering the country.
Country, honor our history, and always salute our great American flag.
America is built on principles of free expression, and one of the beautiful things about America is that you can choose, as I would, to salute the American flag, or you can choose not to salute it. You can choose to burn it if that is your feeling of how you wish to express yourself. That is protected under the Constitution. That is what makes America America.
Revolutionized industries, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and made America the single greatest nation in the history of the world, and we are making it greater and greater every single day.
It is strange to suggest that America is being made greater and greater every single day when 120,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus and 45 million Americans have lost their jobs, and in every state of the country, anti-racism protesters are protesting the disregard that our society has shown consistently for black lives.
And we are going to keep on winning, winning, winning. We are one movement, one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. America will soon be thriving like never before because, ladies and gentlemen of Oklahoma, the best is yet to come. Together we will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. Thank you, Oklahoma. Thank you.
And that appears to be the end of President Trump's address. The president is playing his walk-off song. He is playing You Can't Always Get What You Want, which is a very strange campaign theme song. The Rolling Stones have objected to his use of it, but he continues to use it. So we heard a lot of strange claims tonight, to be honest. I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm Alan Piper, NowThis senior politics producer. I had particular support today from NowThis producers Ian McKenna and Maddie Green. The president talked about a lot of things. I want to close by naming some people I did not hear him talk about. The many black Americans who have died at the hands of police in just the past few years. In his warm-up speech, Vice President Pence said the name of George Floyd, but I do not believe, unless I missed it during a moment of fact-checking, I do not believe that the president said his name or the name of any other black American who has suffered death or injustice. We are at a moment where the coronavirus is killing Americans. It has killed 120,000 Americans, and APM Research Labs released data showing that by May 20th, more than 20,000 black Americans had died of the coronavirus. That amounts to 1 in every 2,000 black Americans. So black Americans are facing a medical health crisis and a crisis of disproportionately dying in police encounters. A recent Rutgers University study revealed that death by police is a leading cause of death for black American men, and that black men and boys are 2.5 times more likely than white men and boys to die at the hands of police. And I want to close by saying some of the names that the President of the United States did not say tonight. Rayshard Brooks, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Michael Lorenzo Dean, Eric Reason, Christopher McCorvey, Christopher Whitfield, Atiana Jefferson, Dominique Clayton, Pamela Turner, Botham Jean, Antoine Rose, Stephen Clark, Brunel Foster, Aaron Bailey, Jordan Edwards, Altira Woods, Paul O'Neill, Terrence Crusher, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Sylville Smith, Terrell Thomas, Willie Tillman, DeMarcus Semmer, Mary Truxillo, Kevin Hicks, Darius Robinson, Torrey Robinson, Peter Gaines, Marco Loud, Christopher Davis, Dijon Perkins, Carlin Rockmore, David Joseph, Wendell Celestine, Anthony Scott, Randy Nelson, Janet Wilson, Keith Childress Jr., Quintonio Legrier, Betty Jones, Kevin Matthews, Michael Noel, Miguel Espinal, Benny Lee Tigner, Nathaniel Harris Pickett, Richard Perkins, Jamar Clark, Michael Lee Marshall, Levante Biggs, India Kager, Terry Crawford, Alonzo Smith, Anthony Ashford, Dominic Hutchinson, Patterson Brown, Lamontez Jones, Junior Prosper, Keith Harrison McLeod, Felix Kumi, Assam Sparrow Manley, Troy Robinson, Christian Taylor, Brian Keith Day, Michael Sabby, Samuel DeBose, Billy Ray Davis, Darius Stewart, Albert Joseph Davis, Sandra Bland, Salvato Ellswood, Joseph Mann, Freddie Gray, Jonathan Sanders, Victor Manuel La Rosa, Brendan Glenn, Alexia Crisane, William Chapman, Walter Scott, Eric Harris, Philip White, Maya Hall, Anthony Hill, Tony Robinson, Natasha McKenna, Frank Smart, Jermaine Reed, Rumaine Brisbane, Tamir Rice, Akai Gurley, Tanisha Anderson, George Mann, Laquan McDonald, Dante Parker, Ezell Ford, Michael Brown, John Crawford, Eric Garner. This is by no means a complete list of black Americans who have died in police encounters in just the last 6 years. At a moment when anti-racism protests are underway in all 50 states, the President did not name any of these black Americans. And he has yet to use the phrase, Black Lives Matter. Wherever you are, please stay safe. My name is Alan Piper. Thank you, and good night.